The sky in the wasteland is always gray, like a broken curtain, unable to cover the radiant clouds of red light hidden from the horizon. Lin Hao squatted on the broken road, wrapped in a broken canvas, staring at the overturned car slaying from nowhere. The wind blew over and rolled up a dust of sand, which made him cough twice, but he didn't dare to blink. There may be food or something worthwhile in the car, so he will live on this dead waste for a few more days. He held a steel tube in his hand, which could be considered a weapon even though he could not see the plunderers or those monsters with different radiation, but at least he could give himself some psychological comfort. Lin Hao licked his cracked lips, his throat as if it was on fire, but the last drop of water in his water tank had already been drunk. Now on this piece of wasteland, the water is more expensive than gold. Who would have found a bottle of uncontaminated water? It would be no different from winning the lottery. No one should be. Lin Hao muttered in a low voice, his eyes swept around. The deserted highway is full of collapsed buildings and slaying bones. Occasionally, you can hear a few strange roars coming from far away, and don't know if it's the sound or some strange creature that is calling. He held the iron tube tightly, stood up slowly, and moved towards the car's slaughter. Every step you take, the gravel under your feet will make a slight KLA sound, which is particularly harsh in this dead and silent environment. The carriage was overturned on the road, and the car had been transformed into a pit by the radiates. The car door was half open, and it was pitch black inside. Lin Hao approached carefully, and a musty smell came from his nose, and there was a little metal fishy atmosphere. He felt nervous. Is this smell not right? It smells like bloody? But I have all come here and I can't go back empty-handed. He gritted his teeth, stretched out the iron tube and opened the car door, and looked in. There was nothing in the car, only a bunch of scattered pieces and a few empty cans, torn boxes. Lin Hao made a dirty sentence and was about to exit when he suddenly stepped on something hard under his feet. When he looked down, he saw a small black metal box, about the size of a palm, with a smooth surface, as if he had not been stormed by the wind and sand of the soil at all. He was stunned for a moment. This thing seemed too incompatible in this place, as if it had fallen from another world. What is this? Lin Hao squatted down, hesitated for a moment, and still reached out and picked up. The box is icy and has a metal touch, but it is light and scattered, as if it is empty. He tried to open it and found that there was a fine line on the edge of the box, which seemed to be able to open it, but no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't move. Just as he was about to give up, the box suddenly clicked and a blue light shot out from it, shining straight on his face. Lin Hao sat on the ground in a scary way, and the box in his hand almost flew out. He looked closely and saw a crystal as big as a fist embedded in the box, which was blue all over, and it seemed like some liquid was flowing, emitting a faint light. There are several small metal wires surrounding the crystal, which look like some kind of high-tech thing. Lin Hao's heart was beating fast. Although he didn't understand what this was, he just told him that this thing was definitely not simple. Is this my treasure? He said to himself, unable to help but smile. But the laughter didn't last for 2 seconds, and the crystal suddenly emitted a low buzzing sound, like a certain machine was starting. Lin Hao's hand shook, and the crystal slid out of the box and fell into his palm. The next second, a cold energy swept across his palms, stimulating every nerve like current. He wanted to throw it away, but his hands seemed to be stuck and could not move at all. Damn! What the hell is this? Lin Hao burst into pieces and tried to slam the picture, but the energy became stronger and stronger. A bunch of messy pictures suddenly flashed through his brain: explosions, fire, and countless scenes that were shattered like rain. His eyes turned dark and he almost passed directly. But at this moment, the energy suddenly disappeared, and the crystals were lying in their hands, as if nothing had happened. Lin Hao was panting and sweating heavily. Looking at the crystals in his hand, he was both scared and curious. He found that this thing had something to do with the legends passed on the wasteland, what secret experiments of the army before the war, what could change the ultimate weapon of the war. He had heard these stories before, but they all acted as jokes. Who would believe this kind of fish? But now, this thing is in his hands, it is actually there. He didn't have time to think too much, and a deep engine sound suddenly came from afar, breaking the dead silence of the wasteland. Lin Hao was shocked and hurriedly stuffed his crystal into his broken backpack, squatted down and hid behind the car's slaughter. The engine sounded closer and closer, accompanied by rough screams and laughter, and it sounded like a team of plunderers. Not long after, the three-wheeled motorcycles were modified to appear on the road, with 5 or 6 tattooed guys sitting on the car, with all kinds of broken weapons hanging from iron sticks to self-made scattered guns. They stopped near the car's slaughter. One of them jumped out of the car, holding a smoke head that was not known where to get, and shouted in a rough voice, "I just heard that there's a stupid cart nearby. There must be something good in the car. Please search for it." Lin Hao held his breath, leaned against the car's body, held the iron tube tightly in his hand, and his heartbeat was so fast that it was about to explode. He knew that he was not a rival to these guys, and fighting hard was to seek death. His only hope was that they would not find themselves and leave after searching. But how can things on the wasteland be so simple? "Hey, there are footprints here." Another thin snatcher squatted on the ground, pointing at the marks left by Lin Hao, grinning, revealing a mouthful of yellow teeth. "It seems that a little mouse is hiding. Brothers, look for it, don't let him run away." Lin Hao burst into a secret voice, and his brain flew quickly. He knew that he couldn't run away. These guys had cars, and the speed was 10 times faster than him. The only way is to start with the strength of the move first and try to make a fight while they are not completely surrounding themselves. He took a deep breath and quietly took out an old handgun from his backpack. This was what he had brought from a dead man a few months ago, with only 3 bullets left inside. It was originally for life-saving purposes, but now it seems that it is not necessary. He poked out his head, aiming at the big block of snatchers, his hands trembling slightly. It's not that he is so cute, but that this broken gun is not reliable at all. Who knows if he can hit it? But before he could pull the switch, a cold sound suddenly echoed in his brain, as if he was talking directly in his brain. When the weapon was detected, the infinite medicine core had been activated, and the sperm was being generated. Lin Hao was stunned for a moment, but without reacting, the gun in his hand suddenly shook, as if some force had been injected into it, and the gun body was slightly hot. He looked down and saw a faint blue light floating beside the gun's box, exactly the same as the light of the crystal. He was shocked. Could it be that thing that was messing around? "Here!" Snap! The plunderer who was far away suddenly discovered Lin Hao's hiding place, and he lifted the scattered gun and shot it in a flash. Zifu hit the car's skeleton, sparks filled with sparks. Lin Hao was shocked and shrunk, his ears were full of the sound of metal being pierced through. He gritted his teeth and couldn't think too much about it. He lifted his gun and pointed the thief at the thief. Bang! A crisp sound of guns. The recoil of the gun was much smaller than he expected, but Zifu accurately hit the shoulder of the big block, and the blood was bleak. The guy yelled and fell to the ground. Lin Hao was stunned. He had never beaten so accurately, and why did the power of this gun suddenly become so great? Damn, are there still pants? He looked down and saw that the number of pants in the box had not changed, and it was still 3 times. No, wait, what is the infinite drug core in the voice in my brain? Is it difficult to open fire now? Kill him! The other plunderers roared and rushed over. Zijing came like a rain spot. Lin Hao had no time to think about it and hid behind the dead body and opened several guns. Every time I pressed the switch, the gun mouth emitted a blue light, and the spigots shot out as if they were not paid, so they were able to escape, almost without any fluctuation. In less than a minute, all 5 plunderers fell down, 3 were gone at the scene, and the remaining 2 were holding their wounds and wailing on the ground. Lin Hao was panting, his brain had not yet come from the turmoil just now. He lowered his head and looked at the gun in his hand. The blue light had disappeared and the gun changed back to the broken style, but the bullet in the box was still 3 times, as if it had never been used. His heart was overturned. What was going on? That crystal is not right. Should that infinite drug core really make the sperm regenerate infinitely? He didn't have time to think about it, and there was another engine sound from afar. This time it was more exciting than it was just now, and it sounded like most of the team had passed. Lin Hao's heart sank, knowing that he could not stay here anymore. The sound of the gun must have attracted all the plunderers nearby. He tightened up several broken Sacker's accessories on the ground, stuffed them into his backpack, and ran towards the ruins on the other side of the road. After running away, he heard a rough roar from behind, "Find that shattered. I'm going to work on him." Lin Hao knew without looking back that the owner of this sound was probably from the Iron Eater army. Who on the wasteland doesn't know about the iron? The snail was the biggest plunderer, with several hundred people under his command, specializing in killing, and heard that he was looking for some secret weapons before the war to use them to conquer the entire wasteland. Lin Hao felt bitter in his heart. He was just an ordinary survivor and couldn't even eat. Why did he get into this? But now is not the time to complain, he has to survive first. As soon as he ran, he touched the crystal in his backpack, and he felt a sense of premonition in his heart. This thing would eventually change his fate, whether it was good or bad. The sky gets darker and the nights on the wasteland are more dangerous than during the day, and the radiator and thieves become more alive. Lin Hao found a half-collapsed building. Diao went in to hide, and gasped on the wall. He took out the crystal from his backpack and looked at it with a faint blue light. All of his brain was full of doubts. What exactly is this thing? Why would he choose him? Also, will the ability to open fire have any price? As he was thinking, a low voice suddenly came from his ears, as if he had flew away from a very far place. "Young man, holding this thing, you could have stabbed a bee." Lin Hao was shocked and turned his head suddenly. He found a skinny old man standing behind him, wearing a torn robe, covered in patterns, and his eyes were so bright that he seemed to be able to see through everything. "Who are you?" Lin Hao subconsciously held his hand tightly and stared at the other party vigilantly. The old man grinned, revealing a mouth with a missing tooth, and slowly said, "Don't be nervous, my name is Lao Long, I'm not here to trouble you. I just want to tell you that the thing in your hand is not a simple toy. It is called Infinite Pill Core. It is the ultimate test of the army before the war. It is so powerful that it can destroy the world, but it is also so dangerous that it can swallow you yourself." Lin Hao was shocked. Although he had just guessed that this was not simple, he still felt his spine was swelling when he heard the boss say this. He asked with a brow, "How do you know these? Also, are you looking for me to fuck me?" The old man smiled and did not answer directly. Instead, he took out an old map from it and threw it in front of Lin Hao. "If you want to survive, just follow this map and find a woman named Yiwu. She can help you figure out the secrets of this core. But I have to remind you that the iron-eating people have already set their sights on you, and the monsters in the radiating area will also be attracted by the energy in this core. If you want to live until tomorrow, it is best to move quickly." Lin Hao looked down at the map, marking a strange place on it, not far from his current location, but he had to pass through the most dangerous area on the wasteland. He raised his head and asked a few more words, but found that the boss had no idea, as if he had never appeared. He felt a little nervous, but he also knew that there was no time to hesitate now. He put away the map, held his hand tightly, took a deep breath, and was about to set out towards the place on the map. The night on the ground was getting colder and colder, and the roars from afar were coming one after another, as if indicating a greater danger was approaching. But Lin Hao knew that no matter what was ahead, he had to go on because he had no way out from the moment he picked up that core. Lin Hao leaned against the corner of the broken wall, and his ears were the low birds at the waste night, like the radiator monsters growing low, or like the wailing sounds from the wind shattered through the gaps in the broken building. He held the broken map given by the boss in his hand, and he could barely see the mark above through the faint moonlight that penetrated through the window. There is a crooked route on the map, and finally a small circle is marked with, next to it, Ye's workshop. Lin Hao didn't know who this Ye was, but since the boss said she could help to figure out the secret of the core of infinite medicine, he had to try it. After all, the people who are now consuming the iron are probably looking for him with wasteland, and they can't hide for a long time. He lowered his head and glanced at the crystals with a slightly blue light in his backpack, and his heart was still a little hairy. Although this thing has been used up with his gun, he always feels that there is no match for him. Every time he used up that infinite ability to open fire, he felt like he was stabbed in his brain and hurt intimately, as if this core was not only giving him strength, but also stealing something quietly. He snatched his head and threw away these miserable thoughts. Now he thought that these are useless, so he can survive first. The night became thicker and thicker, and the temperature on the wasteland dropped straight. Lin Hao wrapped the broken canvas on his body and gritted his teeth and stood up. He knew that night movements were dangerous, but the iron-eating people might catch up at any time, and staying here and waiting for death was not an option. He checked the gun and the box was still full. Although he knew that this was the core skill, he still couldn't help but look at it twice, as if he was sure that all this was not a dream. Then, he took a deep breath, pushed open the door of the dead body, and touched the direction marked on the map. The nights of the wasteland are more stressful than during the day. Under the gray sky, the horizon is filled with red light, which is the residual cloud, reminding every survivor that this land is no longer a human home. Lin Hao walked along the road on the map, with gravel and dry cracked soil under his feet. Occasionally, he could see a few galvanized steel tendons emerging from the ground, as if he was about to collapse everyone passing by. He walked as lightly as possible, paying attention to the surrounding static at any time, for fear of suddenly launching a patrol team that shot monsters or plunderers. After walking for about an hour, the route on the map began to point to a more dense area of ruins. This place looks like a town before the war, with broken houses and overturned road lights falling in the streets, all kinds of garbage scattered, from broken wheels to iron cans that were radiated and corroded. Lin Hao felt nervous. This kind of place was usually the snatcher's place or the hiding place for radiating monsters. Going in was like taking his life. But the map is clearly marked. Ye's workshop is located deep in the ruins, and he has no choice. He gritted his teeth, held his hand tightly, squatted down and hid behind a half-collapsed wall, and looked into the situation ahead. The streets are quiet and there is nothing to be tranquil, but this kind of tranquilness makes people uneasy. He was about to move forward, and suddenly he heard the sound of a metal collision coming from a distance, as if someone was pounding something. He was shocked, and he shrank his head tightly, holding his breath. The sound was getting closer and closer, and with several low spells, it sounded like several people were quarreling. Lin Hao carefully poked his head out from the corner of the wall and saw 3 guys wearing broken protective clothing rummaging around a bunch of waste irons for something. They were wearing their own weapons and their faces were covered with rags, as if to prevent radiation, but the look of the evil spirit was obviously not a good person. Lin Hao secretly shouted that these people were probably the edge team of the Iron Eater army, specializing in plundering resources in the ruins, and then caught the survivors. "Mom, there is nothing in this broken place, I'm wasting my time." One of the big men kicked a can and said carelessly, "I heard that the guy was looking for a core person with some core, and the money was so high that we would get money when we found them." Another thin man smiled and his voice was as bad as an old man. "Don't make money? Don't dream at first. That guy said he could beat his son to the point of not having money. If we meet such a small character, we will die. Or the old man is actually going to get rid of the trouble and go back to work." Lin Hao felt a sank in his heart. Sure enough, the iron-eating man had already spread his news. Now it is estimated that the entire wasteland plunderers are looking for him. He held his hand tightly and his brain flew quickly. It is impossible to walk around now. The route on the map must pass through this ruin. It is hard and too dangerous. Once it is discovered, it is still a bit difficult for him to deal with 3 by himself. The only way is to wait for them to go far, or, it's a good move first. He took a deep breath and the cold voice sounded in his brain. "When the weapon was detected, the core of the infinite medicine has been activated, and the skull is being generated." The gun body was slightly hot, and the blue light flashed over, and Lin Hao's heart was slightly immersed. He aimed at the big one and was about to kill him if he hit him, but at this moment, his brain suddenly felt a sting, as if a skull had penetrated. He couldn't help but hum, his hand trembled, and almost dropped the gun to the ground. "Who is there?" The thin man had sharp ears, and he immediately turned over when he heard the sound, lifted the iron stick in his hand and rushed towards the place where Lin Hao was hiding. Lin Hao secretly shouted, knowing that he could not hide, so he gritted his teeth and put on the gun, which made him feel like a blow to the thin man. With a bang, Ziwei accurately hit the other party's chest. The guy screamed and fell down, and his blood instantly dyed the broken protective clothing. There are enemies! Turn on fire! The remaining two plunderers reacted quickly, and they launched their own scattered guns and shot towards Lin Hao. Zifu hit the wall, the gravel was flying. Lin Hao shrank and turned his head tightly, his heart beat so fast that it was about to explode. But he knew that he could not retreat, and his handgun was infinite with the support of the core, and fighting hard was not a matter of no calculation. He clenched his teeth and took advantage of the gap between the other parties swinging, and opened the two guns. The blue light flashed, and the two wielders fell to the ground without even humming. Lin Hao was panting heavily, and the stinging sensation in his brain had not completely disappeared. It seemed like he had to pay a little if he used the core power once. He looked down at the gun. The blue light had faded away, but his palms were a little numb, as if they were being hit by a shock. He felt uneasy. This core was indeed not a simple thing. The boss said correctly that this thing might really devour himself. But now is not the time to think about these things. He has to leave this place tightly, and the gun will definitely attract more people. He quickly plundered the three snatchers' equipment and found a few pieces of pressure-reducing grills and a bottle of water that looked uncontaminated. Although not much, it could at least allow him to take a few more days. He stuffed things into his backpack and followed the map and continued to move forward. The air deep in the ruins became more and more stressful, and the radiant smell became more and more heavy. Lin Hao could feel a tingling sensation on his skin, as if he was being invaded by something. He knew that this place was no longer far from the radiating area. That kind of place was the most dangerous area on the wasteland, full of strange monsters and unpredictable radiating sites. Ordinary people basically went there without going back. But the map was clearly marked. Ye's workshop was right next to the forbidden area, so he could only walk forward with his head. After walking for another half an hour, a building that looked like a complete one appeared in front of me. Although the outer wall was broken, it could be seen that it was the military style before the war. There was a crooked sign hanging at the door with the words Waste Iron Recycling Station. Lin Hao was moved, and this should be the Ye's workshop marked on the map. He approached carefully and found several self-made traps at the door, such as those used to prevent plunderers or monsters. He walked over the trap, knocked on the door, and shouted in a low voice, "Is anyone?" "I'm introduced by the boss." After the door calmed down for a while, a cold woman came out and said, "Old man? Is that old man still alive? Tell me, are you looking for me?" Lin Hao relaxed his voice. At least this person didn't sound like an enemy. He said across the door, "My name is Lin Hao, and I have something called Infinite Pill Core in my hand. My boss said you can help me figure out the secret of this thing." After the door was silent for a while, then with a click, a zipper opened, and a woman in her ragged work clothes poked out. She looked over 20 years old, with oil stains on her face, her hair was casually shaved into a group, and she was holding a wrench in her hand. Her eyes were so sharp that she could see through people. Lin Hao guessed that this should be Yi. "Core? Come in, don't stand outside, as the radiation will burn your brain," Yi said coldly, turning around and walking into the house. Lin Hao hesitated for a moment and followed him in. The space in the house was larger than he thought, full of various mechanical devices that scraped parts and semi-finished products. There were several self-made weapons that looked very advanced, such as some high-tech thing. Yi walked to a broken workbench, turned over and looked at Lin Hao, and asked, "Where's the core? Take it out and let me take a look." Lin Hao took out the blue crystal from his backpack and passed it over. When Yi came, his eyes lit up instantly, as if he had seen something rare. She put on a pair of old protective lenses, took a bunch of tools and started to check the crystals, and said in her mouth, "The energy waves are stable, and the structure is complete. It is indeed a pre-war experience. The energy density of this thing is higher than I thought, and it is simply a mobile core." Lin Hao felt embarrassed and couldn't help asking, "Do you know what this is?" Lao Long said that this thing is very dangerous and will swallow the user. Is it true or false? Yi looked up at him, his eyes chaotic, as if there was something hidden. She put down her tools and said in a deep voice, "Old man hasn't cheated you. This is the ultimate weapon developed by the army before the war, called the Infinite Pill Core, which can make any weapon pill regenerate infinitely, and even evolve into shape according to the user's will. But its energy is too strong, and the body of ordinary people can't bear it at all. Excessive use will invade your nervous system and even turn you into a monster. Not to mention, it will also share the different scenes in the radiating area, causing some unpredictable things." Lin Hao's heart sank, and the stinging sensation in his brain seemed to come back. He gritted his teeth and asked, "Is there any way to control it? Or turn it off?" Yi Wu shook his head. "It is impossible to turn it off. Once you recognize it, it will be determined by you unless you die. However, the way to control it is said that the origin of the core is in a forbidden area deep in the wasteland, where there is the experience data of the army before the war, which can unlock the safety mode of the core and limit its energy output. But that place is not a good place to go, and it will be a life-threatening death." Lin Hao was silent. He knew that Yi said it was right. The forbidden area on the wasteland was not something that ordinary people could touch, but if he didn't go, he would have been caught by the core or the iron-eating person. Both sides are dead ends, the only area is to die early or late. Yi looked at his expression, as if he had guessed his thoughts, and said lightly, "Don't rush to make a decision. I can help you improve your weapon, make the core energy utilization rate higher, and reduce the burden on your body. But for exchange, you have to help me do something. I need some special materials in the forbidden area to complete a practical experiment. If you can bring it back, I will tell you more about the core secrets." Lin Hao clicked a little. Although he was unwilling to do so, he had no choice now. He asked, "What materials? Where is the prohibited area?" Yi Wu took out a hand-painted straw from the drawer, marking a location on it, not far away, but right next to the radiating restricted area. She pointed to the sketch and said, "This place is called Fire Valley, which is one of the most unstable areas in the forbidden area. The core energy will cause co-fire there, which may tear open the space cracks and release some unknown things. The material you are looking for is a blue crystalline mine, which usually appears near the cracks. Remember, don't stay too long, otherwise you may not be able to come back." Lin Hao took the grass picture and his heart was heavy. He knew that 99% of this mission was to die, but it wouldn't work if he didn't do it. He looked at Yi and asked, "Are you sure this helps me control the core?" Yi Wu heard the voice and spoke plainly, "I can only say that this is the only hope at the moment. You can choose it yourself." Lin Hao clenched his teeth and clicked the head. He knew that there was no easy choice on the wasteland, and every step was a life-threatening victory. He put away the drawings and prepared to come out at dawn, but at this moment, a deep sound of silence suddenly came outside the workshop, as if something huge was approaching. Yi's face changed. He quickly grabbed the weapon on the table and said in a low voice, "No, it's a radiator monster. The core energy has attracted them." Lin Hao was shocked and tightly held his hand and gun. The cold voice in his brain sounded again. When the threat was detected, the core of the infinite medicine was activated. He looked out the window. Several huge shadows were approaching in the darkness, and red eyes flashed with strange light in the night, like monsters crawling out of the ground. He took a deep breath and knew that he could not avoid this battle, so he had to fight hard. The sound of the birds outside the workshop was getting closer and closer, like a shaking shell, and a strong and radiant smell of fishy smell filled the air, making people's stomachs swell. Lin Hao held the gun tightly, and his palm was already sweating coldly. The cold mechanical sound in his brain was still resounding. The threat level is rising, the core energy output of the infinite medicine is increasing. He could feel the gun being slightly hot, and the blue light was flowing against the gun, as if he was about to burst out some terrifying power. He glanced at the leaves beside her. She was quickly checking a self-made energy step gun in her hand. Although her face was calm, there was a tight look in her eyes. These monsters are a variation in the forbidden area, and the energy fluctuations in the core lead them to them. Yi said in a low voice, with a chorus in his breath. I thought the shielding device here could hold it up, but I didn't expect the energy of the core to be so strong. Be prepared, they won't give you a chance to breathe. Lin Hao clicked a little, his throat was as dry as if it was on fire. He looked out through the broken window of the workshop. Several huge shadows were approaching in the night. Their figures were distorted as if they were shot and forced to slap them. The front one has 4 thick legs, with spikes on the body, and the head is cracked into 2.5, revealing teeth that are full of mouths and hair-like. The red eyes flash with strange light in the dark. Lin Hao's heart sank. This thing was more terrifying than any monster he had seen on the wasteland before, as if he had crawled out of the nightmare directly. Bang! Yu took the lead in pulling the pulley without waiting for the monster to approach. The energy gun in her hand shot out a blue beam of light, hitting the monster's cracked head. The monster let out a harsh roar, and a big hole was blown into its head, but its body did not fall down, but instead accelerated toward the workshop, and the spikes scratched the ground. Lin Hao bit his teeth and put his gun on the monster several times. The blue light flashed over and the Z-beam seemed to be free of money. Every time he hit the monster's connection, he beat his movements to the forefront. The vitality of these guys is strong enough. Don't waste your time and aim at the core. Yi shouted, quickly switching to the weapon mode. The gun of the energy step gun condensed a stronger light, and then a heavy blow directly blows the monster's upper body into pieces. The limbs were scattered all over the ground, and the smell of black blood was everywhere, but there were more shadows approaching behind them, and roars came one after another, as if the monsters in the entire forbidden area were shocked. Lin Hao's heart was beating fast, and the stinging sensation in his brain began to cause trouble again. Every time he pressed the switch, the feeling of being stabbed was even more obvious. He knew that this was the core of invading his body, but now he had no time to control these things and could only hold them hard. He gritted his teeth and continued to open the fire. With the blessing of the core, the gun turned into a small gun, and the Z shot like a rainstorm, smashing the monsters in front into sieves. There are too many of them, we can't hold back if this continues. Lin Hao shouted with a heavy breath, with a hint of anxiety in his voice. The wall of the workshop has been knocked to pieces by monsters. Several spike monsters smashed the door directly with their bodies, and the iron door made a harsh twisting sound, which may be knocked open at any time. Yu glanced at the surroundings, his eyes turned cold, and he quickly grabbed a metal ball the size of a fist from the workbench, with complex lines on it, like some kind of self-made bomb. Retreat to the back, I'll come to the clean room, she shouted, pressed the button on the metal ball, and threw it towards the door. The metal ball drew an arc in the air, and when it landed, it sounded a sharp beach, which suddenly exploded. A strong electromagnetic wave spread out with the explosion as the center, instantly covering the area of more than 10 meters around the workshop. The monster in front was hit by the current, and his body twitched and fell down, and the air was filled with a burnt smell. This is my electromagnetic bomb, which can swell their neural system, but the effect is only a few seconds, so it will be tightened. Yi pulled Lin Hao and ran to the back door of the workshop, flying fast. Lin Hao followed her, and his brain was still in chaos. Although the explosion just now stopped the monster, the roar from afar did not stop, but instead increased, as if the entire forbidden area was turned upside down by the core energy. The two people rushed out of the workshop from behind, and what came towards them was a more dense radiant mist, with a pungent smell in the air, making people dizzy. Yi took out an old gas mask from his waist and threw it to Lin Hao. His temper was rapid. Put it on, don't suck too much flashing in, otherwise you will become something like those monsters. Lin Hao took the mask and put it on quickly. Although the mask's filtering effect was not very good, it could at least make him catch his breath. He followed Yiwu through the ruins, with broken concrete and steel bars under his feet, and every step seemed to be stepping on the tip of a knife. The group of monsters behind him had recovered from the influence of electromagnetic impulse and roared and caught up with him, with speed that was too fast, as if it was completely unobstructed by the terrain. We have to go to the Rift Valley. Yi shouted as he ran away, his voice coming from behind the mask a little terrible. That is the most unstable place in the forbidden area. The core choker will be stronger, or it may tear open the space cracks and lead these monsters to another place. Lin Hao's heart sank. Getting away from the Rift Valley was originally a life-and-death mission. Now he is still chasing a group of monsters and running to death. But he also knew that there was no other choice now, he could only win one. He gritted his teeth and clenched his gun, ready to threaten him at any time. The two of them ran all the way and finally reached the edge of the Fracture Valley in half an hour. This place is even more strange than Lin Hao imagined. The ground seemed to be torn apart by some huge force, forming a deep and invisible island valley. The rock walls on both sides of the island valley were covered with blue crystalline mines, emitting faint light, exactly the same as the light in the core. There was a strong wave of energy in the air, causing the skin to sting, as if it would be torn to pieces at any time. It's these mines. I need them to complete the experiment. Yi pointed to the blue crystal on the rock wall, with a burst of excitement in his language, but his face suddenly darkened. However, the core energy will get out of control here, you have to be careful not to tear the cracks completely, otherwise we may all be sucked in. Lin Hao clicked a little and took out the core from his backpack. The blue light became even more dazzling under the influence of the energy field in the Fracture Valley, as if it was about to explode at any time. He could feel the stinging feeling in his brain getting stronger and stronger, as if someone was knocking on his head with a snatch, but now there is no time to retreat. He gritted his teeth, approached the rock wall, and prepared to dig a few pieces of mine. At this moment, the group of monsters behind him finally caught up with him, and his roar was shaking. Lin Hao looked back and saw that the dozens of different changes had blocked the retreat. The red eyes flashed with crazy light in the darkness, as if they were completely stimulated by the core energy and lost their minds. His heart sank, knowing that he really couldn't escape this time. "Yay, hand the mine to you, I'll hold them." Lin Hao shouted, lifted his gun, and the blue light in the core instantly stormed, and the shape of the gun directly evolved into a heavy gun, and the gun sprayed blue energy splashed at the gun's mouth, swept towards the monster group like a storm. Each bomb has a destructive power, killing monsters to death, but their number is actually too large, killing one batch after another, as if it will never be killed. Yi Xiao quickly climbed up the rock wall and knocked down several blue mines with his tools, moving as fast as if he was racing against death. She looked back at Lin Hao, and there was a flash of hesitation in her eyes, but at the end she gritted her teeth and shouted, "Stop it, I will help you with the mine." Lin Hao didn't reply, but just bit his teeth and kept turning on the fire. The stinging pain in his brain was so strong that it made his eyes dark, and his arms began to tremble unconsciously. He knew that this was the core of his body backfire, but now he stopped and died, so he could only hold on. The group of monsters was getting closer and closer. The nearest one had already hit him. The spike pierced his shoulder directly, and the blood instantly dyed the torn clothes. "Damn!" Lin Hao screamed in pain, and suddenly smashed the monster with his gun, then opened several guns at his head, and beat it into a pile of flesh. But this shock almost exhausted his energy, and the stinging sensation in his brain seemed to explode, and the visual line began to blur. He reluctantly held his body, turned to look at Yi, and found that she had received the mine and was running towards him. "Let's go! The crack is about to open!" Yi shouted, dragging Lin Hao, and ran towards the edge of the yacht valley. Only then did Lin Hao notice that the blue light in the core had become so strong that it was dazzling, and the air in the middle of the valley began to twist, forming a black crack, like an entrance to another world. The energy field around the crack is becoming increasingly unstable, and the ground is shaking, as if it will collapse at any time. The monster group seemed to feel the threat of the crack, and the roar became even more crazy, but their target was still Lin Hao and the core. Lin Hao gritted his teeth and ran with Yi, but the stinging pain in his brain finally reached the limit. His eyes turned black and his feet softened, and he fell to his knees. The core slid from his hand, the blue light swelled, and the cracks doubled in an instant, making a low sound of slut. "Lin Hao! Stop!" Yi looked back and his face changed drastically, and he ran back to help him. But at this moment, a rough roar suddenly came from the distance, accompanied by the sound of the engine. Dozens of modified war cars were driven out of the ruins, and the car was full of people from the Iron Eater army. On the front car was a tattooed slut, wearing an iron mask on his face, and a huge battle axe in his hand. It was the Iron himself. "Ha ha ha, I finally found you, little shattered. Hand over the core, I will kill you." The sound of the Iron dying was rough and crazy, as if he didn't take the cracks and monster groups seriously at all. His subordinates quickly scattered, forming a circle of enveloping guns, and all the guns were in line with Lin Hao and Yi. Lin Hao's heart sank, knowing that this time he was really desperate. With the monster group in front and the Iron Eater group behind, the rifts are still expanding and may swallow them all at any time. He looked down at the core on the ground, and suddenly a crazy idea flashed in his brain. If the energy in the core could tear the crack, would it be used to destroy everything? "Yi, help me hold on to the Iron. I have a plan," Lin Hao said, gritting his teeth. His voice almost couldn't be heard clearly. Yi was stunned for a moment, but looking at the determination in his eyes, he still pointed a little, and put on an energy step to fire at the Iron Eater army, trying to attract their attention. Lin Hao took a deep breath, lifted up the core, endured the pain in his brain, and focused all his will on the core. The blue light burst into an instant, and the core energy seemed to be completely released. The handgun directly evolved into a huge energy cannon. A group of terrifying light balls condensed from the muzzle, as if they could destroy everything. "Iron Devourer, monster, and this dead waste, all gave me to die." Lin Hao roared angrily, pulled the rifle, and the light ball shot out suddenly, instantly swallowing the monster group in front of him, and blasted it into pieces with the forward troops of the Iron Devourer army. The explosion shattered the rock walls of the Fracture Valley to collapse. The cracks expanded to an extreme limit, and a sharp sound came out, as if something had been torn apart. "Lin Hao! The energy is out of control, stop quickly!" Yi shouted, but it was too late. The backlash of the core finally reached the top, and Lin Hao's consciousness began to blur, with ghosts in front of him, as if he would collapse at any time. But he clenched his teeth and forced the last will to fix the crack in the energy cannon, trying to close it with the core power. At this moment, the Iron slaughtered out of the explosion of smoke, covered in blood, and half of the Iron mask was blown up, revealing a slim face. Lin Hao was no longer able to dodge. Seeing that the battle axe was about to slash, Yi suddenly rushed over and used his energy step to catch the blow, but the huge impact force still shocked her, hitting the rock wall, and spitting out a mouthful of blood. Lin Hao felt nervous, and his anger instantly burned all over his body. He used the last force to tamper the trigger, and the energy cannon emitted a sound of a slag, directly killing the Iron into a bloody fog, leaving no residue left. But this blow also exhausted Lin Hao's power. His eyes went dark and his mind was completely in darkness. The blue light in the core began to dim, and the crack did not close, but instead emitted a strong suction force, pulling everything around it into it. Yi slammed and got up, dragging Lin Hao to run away, but the suction became stronger and stronger, as if it was completely irresistible. At this moment, a low voice suddenly erupted, as if it was transmitted from the depth of the crack. The test was completed, the core was finally unblocked, and the energy was stable. Lin Hao heard this voice in a daze, and felt the stinging sensation in his body began to weaken, as if the core finally stopped backlash. He opened his eyes tightly and found that the blue light stabilized again, and the suction force of the crack gradually disappeared, as if it was closed by some force. "We survived?" Lin Hao asked, his voice so weak that he could hardly hear it. Yi sat beside him, gasping heavily, and a little bit of his head, with a cumbersome look in his eyes. "It seems that the core recognizes you, but this is just the beginning. The Iron is dead, his army will not be able to stay calm, and there are secrets in the Forbidden Area, which are far more dangerous than we imagined." Lin Hao smiled hard, and had no energy to reply. He looked down at the core of his hand, and the blue light was still flashing faintly, as if there were more secrets hidden. He knew that the battle on the wasteland had not ended yet, and there was a bigger storm waiting for him ahead. But at least now, he is still alive and has the opportunity to face everything. In the distance, the radiant clouds still shine red, like a curse that will never dissipate. Lin Hao leaned against the rock wall, closed his eyes, and his ears were deserted birds, as if he was predicting the arrival of the next battle.